Right, we're live. We're transitioning. Oh no, oh no. I need to. Whatever. I'll figure this out. Yeah, so. Hello, welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about. And I have. And that's Invincible for people who don't know. I tried to do it like they do in
Listening
the.
to this, the joke doesn't land at
Yeah.
all.
Yes, yeah. So for the people listening at home, I popped the title card in, which is what they do in the show. Um,
Mhm.
So, um, but before we do that, buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what we do on this podcast, buddy?
On this podcast, we like to. I actually, you dropped out at the last second, so I was
Okay.
like, wait, what? Did he finish his sentence? On this podcast, we like to talk about games, but we also like to talk about comics and movies and TV show. And Invincible, as I get, it's like the most memeable thing I feel like
Hmm.
that's come out of pop culture in a long time. Like it seems like a bunch of meme templates have come out of this, which I feel like is great.
Yeah.
Is good stuff. It's an animated show on Amazon Prime, 8 episodes, 45 minutes each, which is a little unusual for animated shows. It's written it's based on a comic written by Robert Kirkman of The Walking Dead fame that he started writing in the mid 2000s, and I do think finished. I think it finished after about 150 issues, of which I have read maybe the first 60, 75 of maybe 90. I don't know. I've read a bunch of them. I used to follow Invisible Weekly, but eventually I just put it. I took it off my pull list, which is like the list of comics that you tell the guys to pull for you every week, and never got back into it. Um,
Yeah,
so
I have listened
yeah.
to, or rather, I have read none of the comics. But we're gonna get into spoilers pretty quick, I imagine. So, what's your top line take? Uh,
My top line take is that I think the comics are better, and I would recommend folks read the comics if they want to get like the Invincible, experience. I also think that the show is fine. It's like it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. I have a lot of problems with it. It's not my favorite thing in the whole world, but I'm probably going to tune into a season 2. And there is like a lot to love. It reminds me a little bit of it is not fine in the way that like Marvel movies are fine, where they're just kind of they don't do anything special, but they also don't do anything particularly poorly. I actually think Invincible does a lot of stuff very good, including the animation and the voice cast, right? Like the the that stuff really nailed it. Like hit the nail on the head. But I have a lot of problems with character and plot stuff that comes out over the course of over the course of the season, that I think overall make for not great storytelling. So I'm very mixed on this one. It's a big mixed bag for me.
I think I gotta agree with that kind of evaluation. There are definitely some things I think are pretty poorly done in the show. But I think the good stuff it does well. Um, J. Jonah Jameson as oh
Oh
no,
my god, iconic! Instantly iconic. He's so
wait,
good.
that's not his real name, right? That's the Spider-Man
No, his
character.
real name is J.K. Simmons.
J.K. Simmons, thank you. Sorry. As Omni-Man, I think was perfect. Um, also, I couldn't stop hearing fucking Jason Mantzoukas whenever Rex spoke.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. Also, I mean, it has a very celebrity voice cast, right? So
Yeah,
Stephen Yuen is Mark Invincible himself. Jillian Jacobs, who is Britta from Community, is Adam Eve, and I could
really,
not
I didn't
unhear that
realize
one.
that.
Yeah, I don't know why. That just was incredibly obvious to me the entire time. But Jason Mantzoukas probably has the most distinctive voice, I would say.
Yeah,
Zachary Quinto's robot. Who else? And then Walter Goggins, I think, is Cecil. So
yeah,
I don't know.
and there's a minor character that's Ezra Miller. Um, uh, but
Oh yeah, the bad guy. Yeah. I
that's a
remember that guy.
spoiler.
Oh my god, fuck, you're right.
Yeah, yeah, that's why I said the minor. Yeah. All right. Well, I enjoyed it. I'd say it was good, and we'll move into spoilers now.
Okay.
Yeah, pure spoiler territory.
Yeah, yeah, that's a pretty minor spoiler,
You
but
know,
it is
it is.
definitely
It
it is
is.
definitely a spoiler.
And you
Yeah,
probably have
like
to be
I think
watching it like actively checking X-ray, right? Um,
yeah.
yeah, because I looked at him like Ezra Miller, and for whatever reason, I always confuse him and Ezra Klein. Not that like I was like, wait, the Vox, just because they're both named Ezra, just because I was like, wait, why is because I also don't have a good sound in my head for Ezra Klein's voice. So I'm like, why is the Vox guy? Oh no, it's the
Sure,
Flash.
sure, fair enough. Yeah, so I do think that the voice cast and the acting is probably like number one
Mm.
in the show in terms of just like the stuff I would say is very good about Invincible is the acting and the action itself. I'm more and more convinced, like as time goes on, that the proper medium for superhero stories is animated television shows. Like
Okay.
I think the serialized nature is how comic book stories are like superhero comic book stories are meant to be told, and I think that the action provided by 2D animation is just really conducive to this stuff. So I think that that was like that was really something else. I have like bigger reservations again about obviously like plot and character stuff, but that's where I wanted to start. It's like these things are good actually.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with that. I also think that like the character development and arc of Mark and even Mark's family, I think is very good. I think that stands in contrast to like I think some of the other characters are very underserved, and I imagine that's the thing that gets fleshed out better in the comics. Um, uh, I think Mark's story and Omni Man's story and his mom's I can't remember that character's name. Um, like all of them inside of that, like their story, I think is very well told. I think, and I think like there's a lot of emotional resonance there, right? Like,
Yeah,
um,
there definitely is. I have a lot of issues with that stuff, but I think Mark himself is really true to form, and I think a good, just interesting character who is in a compelling, who has kind of compelling drama. Um, and then I also really loved Omni Man. There's good stuff in here about Omni Man that I think is better than the comics, and there's bad stuff that I think is worse from the comics that we can like get into. And I really loved sort of the dynamic between Mark his mom
mm,
over the course of the series. That's actually kind of like a bedrock relationship that I feel like was very important to like the development of the show, and it would have been much worse if like it wasn't there. It's kind of the like emotional backbone in a
yeah,
way of the story, which is a little bit odd, but I don't know, it's just how I feel
yeah.
about it.
There's also like so there was a weird moment. So I don't know how universal this is, but like when Mark says to his mom, like his mom tells him to do something, and he says make me, right? Like that's like not just a super like that's like a very real thing that like happens in the real world, right? Like I don't like I remember the moment I realized I could overpower my mom physically if I wanted to, and not that I ever needed to or anything, but like that's like a real power balance dynamic between like mother and son that happens at some point.
Yeah.
Um, that I thought was like super interesting to see like represented at all in stuff. It usually gets kind of glossed over. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, but
um so where do you want to go next?
you wanted your talk about the Omni Man stuff that you thought was better
All
than
right,
this?
all right. Here's my Omni Man hot take. The Omni Man plot twist is bad and doesn't work, and I don't like it. I think part of this is because I know the comics, and I don't want to do this by doing the comparison of this is how the comics did it, I but that's sort of inevitable. So the thing that I think sucks about Omni Man and makes it hard to do this show in this structure is the end of episode 1 reveal that he murders the global guardians, right? That's the huge, and it's a huge moment, and it's a big like oh, what the fuck if you've never watched the show before. But I actually think that it robs that mystery that is part like that goes for several episodes, right? It robs that mystery of a lot of its bite. I actually think that it could have been a sort of like more real, I guess I would say, like murder mystery than that, right? The revelation of which that Omni Man is, in fact, a Viltrumite conqueror, right, would just hit so much differently if the end of episode stinger didn't include him brutally murdering these people. I also think that it fundamentally kind of misunderstands sort of the appeal of like Invincible. And I think that's a weird thing to say, because if I were to bet, this is a more true version of Invincible than the comics are, right? Like, I think if you were to ask Robert Kirkman, like right now, which is more true to your vision of Invincible, right? He would go the TV show, right? The TV show gave me all of this room to do whatever stuff that, like, we know that there is stuff in the Invincible comic that he just kind of came up with on the fly, but that is properly sort of like seeded, right, in the TV show, all that other kind of stuff. But the thing that really I have a hard time with in the show is it goes so quickly to a place of really abject violence and brutality that you don't get the juxtaposition that's really keen, right? Because I think the promise of the Invincible pitch is that you're doing this normal Spider-Man teen drama shit. It's who am I gonna ask to the fucking prom, right? And then, like, out of nowhere, it is Mark fighting for his life against world-shattering odds, right? And he is on the brink of death, right? And I think that the juxtaposition between, oh, Amber texted me, but I haven't texted her back. Is she mad at me? And this fucking walking cat lion man is going to kill me, right? That works best when it is little flashes of violence, like they are harsh and brutal and come kind of out of nowhere in sort of the sea of the team drama. Does that make sense? Whereas in the show, it just kind of like, you do a little bit of team drama in the first episode. Even in some of the fights in that episode, I felt like it got pretty violent pretty quickly. And then the ending of the episode is maybe, the most violent piece is outside of the finale, right? Whereas I kind of wish that episode 1 just really sold me on the Spider-Man pitch, and it took time to build into that. Does that make sense? That's
It,
kind of a couple different pieces all wrapped into one, but that's the overarching aspect of it.
I get it. I think the problem is in this as like a, a remake of a comic book, right? Like,
Mm.
I knew going into this that that it was like a deconstruction type piece, right? Like, and that would have been kind of like, because that's how it's sold, right? Like, it's another one of these deconstruction type piece, um, and so you can't. I don't think you can get away with as much the kind of like stark contrast, because the contrast is supposed to be like every other superhero movie that's come out, right? Like this, like the teen drama is actually Spider-Man Far From Home, right? Like, and then this is the contrast piece, which
Yeah, actually, that actually makes a lot of sense to me. And this is what's weird about the comic, because I would not describe the comic as a deconstruction, right? There are these moments of brutality, right, in there, but fundamentally, I don't think the comic has anything deconstructive to say about superheroes. It's just all stakes at that point, right? It is just like, listen,
it's just like a
Mark
twist.
will get his ass beat, and it is a dangerous world out there, and there are casualties to this, but it's not like Watchmen, right? This is not like The Boys, where it is like trying to kind of say like, oh, superheroes are bad actually. I think the TV show is doing superheroes are bad actually. And that's kind of what I mean when I say that I feel like this is Robert Kirkman's like more true version of it. Like, the first 12 issues of Invincible are so played straight team drama that it is like it boggles my mind a little bit that they looked at that stuff and they were like, okay, but what if we just like put a bunch of really brutal fight scenes right in here, Um, like, cause just to lay out the structure for what the comic was like, the first 2 books, are kind of this like teen drama stuff, right? The first book, the overarching plot is that the teacher that Mark doesn't like at high school is actually a supervillain, and it's like, oh, haha, upbeat, lighthearted, right? My least favorite teacher is also a supervillain. I get to punch him, and he goes to whatever. Um, and then it's book 3 that does the Omni-Man stuff, where at the start of book 3, Omni-Man murders the Global Guardians, and it all just kind of that, like, and it just kind of rides a roller coaster to him and Mark fighting. That's the end of the 3rd book. 18 issues or so, maybe 15 issues or something like that. And Omni-Man leaving into space. This puts, it takes that Global Guardian beat. It takes it from after 2 whole arcs of just kind of like upbeat teen comedy, and it puts it right up front, right? And I do think that they compensate for it a little bit, right? It's not quite a murder mystery in the sense of like a who done it. It's more about the suspense of like, will this person figure out
Right.
the secret, right? Will Mark's mom figure out that Mark's dad is killed all these people? But something that I think really didn't hit for me right in the TV show that is sort of emblematic of this is Mark's dad does the explanation of who the Viltrumite are and gives that explanation to Mark, I think at the top of episode 2, right? That comes from like the second issue of the comic book, right? And then at the very end, he sort of retells that story, but as space fascists, right? The distance between those matters a lot, I feel like, because for the first 12 issues of the comic book, you don't have any reason to suspect Omni-Man is anybody but this world's Superman, right? You have no, that's just the world we live in. He is a good upstanding guy. He's a good father. He cares a lot about his son or whatever else. And he says some of this stuff, right? Like he says about like the Mark has a duty to his people or whatever else. But it's like, because the secret is kept, that stuff isn't sinister. All of that goes away because every time that happens, it is filled with these like super sinister undertones. And that stuff, I don't know. It's just like that really killed a lot of the core drama in his character for me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's definitely different then, right? Like I get that, right? Because the thing too is like he's not played as a great father, right? He's played as like an okay father, right? Like maybe one who's trying, but like there's also like shit like his mother having to step on his foot to be like, oh, that's great, son, that you're getting your powers, right? Like, um, he's always played as kind of like reluctant and stoic in a way that I think actually falls into a kind of like a much more classic coming of age story way, right? Like like the father, the emotionally unavailable father who has to like push himself to like connect with his son type
And,
of
and to
deal.
be honest with you, I actually liked a lot of that stuff, right? I think that the dynamic between Mark and his dad is richer on its taken as its own, right? But it is kind of undercut by this other stuff, right? Because from the beginning that he's a bad guy, basically. Like there's
Right.
really no other way to interface with that information that besides just that Mark's dad is a bad guy, right?
Yeah.
um so even though I liked those moments more, and I do think that, and this is another thing that I think that the show missed, Nolan is a very complex and he's a really complex psychology, and you get some of it, right? Obviously, him leaving the planet in tears, at the end of the show, is a manifestation of that, right? But I just feel like there's no way you could have this guy show up in episode 1, murder the Justice League essentially of this universe, right? And get me to sort of buy into that complex psychology. Just because it's like it's so evil on its face, obviously, right? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and I think they kind of fumbled the ball there because they I think they at least try to like give it a little bit of like mystery, right? It's like oh he like they say like he must have been controlled by or mind controlled, right? And they keep playing that, right? Like, and that always rung super hollow to me. I just didn't find it convincing, but like it
Yeah.
like the people in the show believed it, right? Like up until the very end where Mark's like who's controlling my father, right? Like um which
Yeah, it's also because that fight at the end is also insanely brutal. It is so much it's brutal in the comics, but it's brutal in a way of frustration. Like, because in the comics it almost feels more like Mark's fault in a way, where he is freaking out. He's clearly like completely breaking down at learning all of this, right? And he is trying to fight his dad like a supervillain, and his dad is trying to talk to him. And the thing that kind of happens is like eventually Nolan is just like, fine, you want to fucking fight? I am going to pulverize you into the ground, right? But because the fight in Invincible the show stretches across that entire episode, right? And it includes all of these extra bits that are just like so much more violent and over the top, like Nolan holding, Mark's face in front of the passenger train or whatever. It's just like none of that stuff is in the comic. It is much more personal just between the two of them. It just like adds this like incredibly like evil, yeah, like there's just no
Yeah.
other way to put it. He's just like insanely evil in the television show in a way that I don't think gets across how, you know, complex the psychology of his character is sort of like underneath all that.
Yeah. No. Okay. That makes sense, right? Like if you don't like if you don't have him wantonly murdering people in the comic, then that's kind of gotta hit much different.
Yeah, like that stuff happens in in sort of an abstract sense, or like he kind of talks about this, but it's all in the conversation, right? Whereas in the show, he just kills a bunch of people and is like, these people are all beneath me, and it's just like it's just a very different vibe. It's just a very different vibe, and I really kind of chafed, I chafed at that stuff. Though I do want to compliment, like I said before, like I think the acting was, you know, really amazing at getting it across, even despite some of these like writing hurdles, right? Obviously them being put in this kind of gauntlet where it's just like, because Cecil's throwing more and more shit at uh at Omni-Man or whatever. Um and it's just kind of like a nonstop fight. Like, even though that undercuts it a little bit, I do feel for Nolan when he is trying to reach, like when he's trying to reach and explain himself to Mark in a way that is, more straightforward. It also really comes out of it also really comes kind of out of left field in the comics, where like, in because there's a longer time period between Nolan killing the Global Guardians and his conversation with Mark, that gets spread out a little bit longer, and it is harder, like in the comic it is more Nolan is clearly losing control of a situation that he thought he had control of, right? Whereas in the show he does have more control over the situation because there's just like more time between the inciting moment of killing the Guardians and the final moment of fighting Mark.
Okay, that makes sense. How much?
Anyway,
Yeah, I just thought of something though, because like, how much do you think like this fight scene? Like, when did the comic come out? Do you know off the top of your head?
2005, 2006, 15
Okay,
years ago probably.
okay, because like, how much of this do you think? Like, because this fight between Mark and Omni Man is essentially the Zod Superman fight from Man of Steel, right?
Hmm.
But like, obviously, with the criticisms, the popular criticisms of Man of Steel is that they don't pay attention enough to that civilian stuff, right? It's also a
Yep.
fight where Zod theoretically wins. How much of this do you think is like a direct response to that, right? Like, because I think,
I absolutely think it. I think culturally speaking, the Man of Steel fight and the aftermath to it specifically, right, where people sort of had this interpretation of, right, how Superman should have acted or whatever, has dominated a lot of how we talk about pop culture, right? We're not doing The Boys obviously, but another Amazon Prime show that is a deconstruction of superhero, The Boys, really goes hard for that kind of stuff, and I think is really trying to kind of I don't want to say stick it to, like stick it to that interpretation of Superman, but it's like clearly sort of like built on that, it's like it's sort of like built on that foundation. In 2006, 2005, whenever this came out, I remember like that issue was the issue that made me pick up Invincible, because a friend of mine told me about it, right? Where, the first 12 issues, people were, people knew Robert Kirkman, right? It was a mildly popular, it was a mildly popular comic, but that issue like landed, and it was just like, oh my god, this is like a moment, right? Um, of just like something insanely, crazy happening. What a plot twist, or, sort of whatever else. And it was also very like, it was seen at the time as like very badass, I guess, which I think is also sort of a pre Man of
yeah,
Steel world where, that the scale of those sorts of fights was more cool than it was dangerous in a way, if that makes sense. Um
not,
so
not only that, but like I know, like I said before, whereas like it has its own kind of like teenage drama reversal, whereas the show relies on like existing properties. Like this coming out kind of like that. This would have come out as a comic book like right at the cusp of like the superhero era, right? Like
Yeah.
the cape shit era, right? To
Yeah, it was
borrow
like right on top of Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man 2, right? Like the
right
X-Men movies were kind of at their apex.
right and
Where
like
all of the shitty ones that we all complain about, like Fantastic Four and Daredevil, were in there.
and Marvel is just like kind of starting to spin up, right?
Yeah.
Like Iron Man 1's like what 2002, 2003, something like that.
Iron
Um,
Man 1's 2008, my dude.
Really? Oh, you know
Yeah.
what? You're absolutely right. Yeah. So this is pre that, and like now it's coming out in the context of the Infinity War saga, right? Like three fucking Marvel shows, right? Like an entire attempt in an aborted DC universe, right? Like
Hmm.
um and so it kind of it kind of exists in that cultural context, right? Which is why I think you see a lot of this like difference of reaction, right? Like I can see like not that I'm a huge comic books reader, but like that makes sense as being like big and shocking back in 2005, whereas
Yeah.
like now it's kind of like it's almost kind of like trite, right? Like it's like trite may be a little bit too much, but like the uber violent kind of thing, right? Like it feels like a version of this story which has been told a couple different times, right? Like
Yeah,
um
and I think also that story has probably aged. I love these stories. Obviously, obviously like I grew up with them, and I would really go to bat for these. But I think that if you were to ask popular comic book fans, they would really sort of recoil at some of the way that these stories were told and were framed. Like I also think of Mark Millar. This is when he was, kind of making it big, and he did the Ultimates, which I think is a very good comic book, and it is also Mark Millar's Ultimates isn't quite a deconstruction. It's like not that smart in a way, but it is definitely showcasing more kind of like asshole heroes than goody two shoes heroes, right? Or even sort of like the mildly, sort of like romance protagonist flawed heroes of like the MCU, where they have like very basic dumb, not actual flaws, right? Um, and I think that that stuff is sort of compounded in this modern era, just because we have like built on that level of storytelling for the last 15 years. Do you know what I mean? Which is why I think they added in the fight scene between Mark and Nolan pushing Mark in front of a commuter train and using him as a blunt instrument to kill countless people, right? Or the thing with the collapsing buildings, right? Like the collapsing buildings feels very, that always evokes Man of Steel to me.
right.
And my thing with that is that it's 9/11.
Yeah.
I think that's the reason people take that very personally, right? Like it's using 9/11 imagery to sort of evoke the scale of the devastation, right? Um, which I think keys people into thinking about it outside of the context of a superhero fight, even though it's just there to sort of, you know, communicate the
The size of the power,
yeah,
whatnot.
the
Yeah.
size of the power and the stakes at play,
Yeah.
right? Like, um but I would so anyway, I agree with your hypothesis and your thesis. I think this is why it has changed a bunch.
Yeah. Well, other stuff to talk about. I mentioned before that I thought that like the other characters don't really get a great um like a great set of things. Like a lot of for an animated show, I guess it's appropriate, but a lot of kind of the motivation seem kind of cartoonish, right? Like Adam Eve's parents are like cartoonishly like oppressive, right? Like um
Yep.
Amber, like specifically Amber, like
Oh my god,
at the
Amber.
very end, being like, I love you again now is like, that felt like it needed like that didn't like
Amber is frustrating because she is much better. In the comics she's very, like Gwen Stacy, right? Just
okay,
the head cheerleader, you know, she's blonde and she's pretty and she's smart and she worries about Mark, and there's all this drama of, is he going to tell her about that he's invincible or not, back and forth or whatever. I actually like the version of Amber they have in the show, and for the first couple of episodes it's pretty, it's pretty cool. It's pretty compelling stuff, right? Um, but then they do this incredibly batshit move of having one episode where Mark does the very typical teen drama superhero thing of having to leave his friends in order to suit up and fight the villain, which makes him look like a coward as Mark, right? And then in the next, and she gets mad at him about that. She's like, I can't believe you ditched me. You know, this is terrible. Then in the next episode, he confesses that he's invincible. And she goes, I knew the whole time. Well, if you knew the whole time, why did you get what?
You knew
like
that he didn't run away, right? Like,
that. I just couldn't process that. I thought that was
yeah.
terrible.
No, I agree. I thought it was like and honestly, I also thought that Amber was going to be a different character, right? Like I thought like it was going to be like the you know the teen drama version where it's like she's like some sort of reporter type who's like looking to figure out that he's invincible because she's
Sure. Yep.
like she's not actually with him because she likes him. She's with him because she's trying to figure out what he is, right? And then you do like the runaround kind of like no, but I actually like you know whatever. But it also kind of rings hollow because like to me it seems very obvious that like he's supposed to be paired up with Adam Eve at some point,
Yep.
right? Like, and so it's like, and I guess it's a tough thing to do because like that's very trope based, but it's kind of like all right, when are they gonna break up so he can go like mac on Adam Eve and like that like you know that can fulfill itself.
Yeah, I mean it's very love triangle-y,
Yeah.
100%.
Especially because they have Adam break up with, or Eve rather, break up with Rex so early, right? Like it's like, oh, so that half's done, and in the next couple episodes we'll have the other half, and then they'll kiss, right? And like, oh, I guess not, right? Like,
Yeah, I think a lot of this stuff was also very rushed. One of my other problems with the show is Battle Beast and Titan. So the penultimate episode where they go and they fight Machine Head, Robot Head, I can't remember his name.
Machine Head, I think, yeah.
Yeah, Machine Head. That also happens, but that happens like 30 issues deep. That happens way in the future in the comics. So it's like the first big milestone is Mark and his dad fight, right? And the second big milestone is Mark gets absolutely fucking thrashed by Battle Beast in that plotline. But that plotline had way more time to sort of like build and grow. And I like Titan a lot. Mahershala Ali is amazing. He's always good in these shows. This is the role that, like he has perfected over the last couple of years of this kind of like tough anti-hero guy. He shows up in a million different things playing this character, right? But like with a heart of gold or whatever. But they did that all in one episode, and they do it before the episode where Mark then gets thrashed again by his dad. And I was just like, what? Like, we need more time to let this stuff play out. Also, the stuff with Robot cloning himself and Monster Girl, that stuff was terrible in the show. And that is from the comics, but it's much better in the comics because it's built off of 30 issues of like build up, and you realize that Robot is legitimately falling in love with Monster Girl because he empathizes with them. Then you learn that Robot is not actually a robot, but this guy or whatever. They do that all in one episode. And so I feel like that stuff did a huge disservice to the show.
yes,
And
they don't have enough time to like do any of these arcs properly for any of these characters, right? Like, and like to be fair, you get a little bit more time with Robot. I agree with you. I think it's poorly done. Like I didn't realize what the guy in the tank was supposed to be. I thought that was like another clone of some sort, right? Like, because it's played opposite of like the twins. I think the twins are fine because they're like 2-bit characters, right? And I thought that was fun, right? Like
I love them. The Mahler twins, hell yeah.
Yeah.
They're great.
And I think that there's some like really great moments, right? Like I enjoy like the recurring kind of like the stepdad and the stepson thing. Yeah. Is Immortal supposed, or Immortal Man or whatever his name is, he supposed to be Abe Lincoln, or is he supposed to be John Wilkes Booth in that flashback scene?
He is Abe Lincoln.
Okay.
He is literally immortal, and he was the president of the United States, Abe Lincoln. I'm pretty sure. To be honest, it's been a while. I might be misremembering, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah, he's that.
Yeah.
Is,
no,
that
it makes
Lincoln.
sense. He looks more like Abe Lincoln than he does look like John Wilkes Booth. But I was like, that's
Immortal. I also Immortal is a much more fleshed out character in the comics. The thing that starts the Omni-Man Mark fight is Immortal coming back, right? So at the like that happens obviously in the episode 8 or whatever, but it's like just kind of one of many like plot beats. In the comics, the Mahler twins take Immortal, put his head back on, and he immediately flies off and starts fighting Nolan out of nowhere, which is not what Nolan is prepared for, obviously, right? And then And then so Nolan and Mark are there. Mark is like, "What the fuck is going on with Immortal? He must be mind controlled." And Omni-Man rips Immortal in half and is covered in his blood, and then realizes that Mark just saw that and goes like, "We have to talk." And that's the thing that, sets up their, right, like their conversation into their fight scene. Um, and then Immortal comes back. I mean, he's fucking Immortal. He comes back after that and is like a major player there's a bunch of drama with him and Cecil and Robot that's all like honestly really good, compelling stuff. I couldn't believe that wasn't really in this season
I'm
because
sure
like
that's going to be in season 2, right? They set it up, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, I guess that's fair. But it was very weird to me that they went so quickly into this monster girl. He clones Rex out of nowhere, like all that stuff.
yeah, no, it's I don't know. I honestly like I enjoyed those moments just because like the whole like I enjoy that kind of like who's the real one kind of like plot device, right?
Sure.
Like who's the clone. Um, uh, and the kind of like sacrifice there, like I thought was like as touching as it could be given like 30 minutes at best of development, right? Like over the course of the season, but
Hmm.
um, yeah, no, it's I definitely agree with you though. It's all super fucking rushed, right? Like, um, I honestly wish we had more time with the demon guy, but I think he's gonna be
Oh
back
yeah,
too.
Damien Darkblood. Yeah, Damien Darkblood being used as a red herring, I think sucks. But the joke is actually pretty straightforward. That like, well, so actually, it's a little bit different in the show. In the show, it's not a joke. He is legitimately on Nolan's tail, and Nolan frames him, right? But in the comic, it is he is trying to figure out who murdered the Global Guardians when everybody knows that it's Omni-Man, but nobody wants to say it. So the suspense is he's gonna kind of like figure it out and make it public. But the funny thing is that he keeps showing up to Cecil and saying, oh, "I've almost figured out who, you know, who murdered the Global Guardians," and we're like 20 issues past that.
Yeah, no, and I mean, Cecil knows who that it's Nolan, right? Like when they banish him, it's like you just like made it too tough, right? Like Omni Man framed you, and so I have to act as if you know that's
Yeah.
like that I believe it. Um,
I
um
do like that stuff from Cecil because, like, Cecil is also a pretty complex character.
yeah,
He's got a lot, he's got a lot going on in that sort of like Nick Fury vein, and it comes out earlier here, which I think is good. One of my favorite things I think about season one is the Stinger montage at the end, where it sort of showcases where Invincible is like, it can't be that bad to be like the hero, and then it shows all of the different, like all of the different things that are sort of loose ends, right? So Cecil making this big army of zombie super soldiers, and the aliens on Mars, and I don't remember what else is in that montage, but I remember really liking that montage.
yeah. No, I agree. There's enough stuff to go back to, right? Plus, like
Yeah.
what was obviously going to be the meta plot or like the overarching plot, which is like Um, I'm guessing he's gonna go talk to the council of whatever, right? From like that Wrath guy, the guy who like
Oh yeah. Oh
evaluate.
man. Alan the Alien. Hell yeah. Yeah, that the stuff with Viltrum is definitely not like resolved. And this is part of what makes Nolan complex and interesting. Is that he's obviously, he's not dead. He just left the solar system to do what? Who knows? There's a lot of drama in that gets revealed way down the line that I think is very like pregnant, I guess
Oh
you
yeah,
would
no,
say.
right, and I think they did a good job of setting up that it's like he actually does have feelings for Mark, right? Like you know, it's I that moment like it was cheesy, but it rang. It worked for me, right? Where
Yeah, no,
at the
that
baseball
moment
game.
read 100%. Even all the other problems that I listed out in that final episode with the fight, with their relationship or whatever, that moment hit just as hard, if not harder, um, than the way that it did in the comics, just because it's really powerful, right? It's just like the perfect line. I that he would, that the only person he would have left is his dad, and it's just like gets me right here.
I also feel like Miles gets really shortchanged in this. Like I could feel that he had more development in the comics. The best friend, the gay best friend.
Oh yeah, he's not gay in the comics. He's
Oh
just a
really?
straight guy. He dates Adam Eve. Adam Eve, when when Mark starts dating Amber, Adam Eve sort of rebounds to his name's not Miles in the comics. It's something else.
I think
It's
it's
like
Miles.
Steve or
Maybe I
something.
screwed it up.
He yeah, so he is not gay. Actually, that is a good change that I think they made because he didn't really have a good or interesting personality. He just kind of was like the guy
His name is
the
William Clockwell. I was
oh
totally wrong.
William, okay. Yeah, the I'm trying to think of what the best friend in the Spider-Man movies is.
James Franco.
Nelson?
Uh,
Yeah, yeah, right.
well, he's Green Goblin's son, so that's
No, 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 not Harry Osborn. Who in the modern Spider-Man movies is the big guy,
oh
the kid.
yeah, the guy in the chair. Uh, damn it.
God,
uh,
now I want to know. I want to say Nelson, but that's absolutely wrong, isn't it?
uh, Ned.
Ned. Yeah. So he in the comics he's very much that Ned archetype, right? Of just like doofy best friend. But I like him better in this, especially because that stuff with Roy is played straight basically out of the comics, but in the comics he's not gay, so there isn't a romantic subtext to it. It's just here's this cool older college kid that I happen to, you know, think is neat.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, like so. I guess I was wrong that he gets more development in the comics, but it feels like it felt like he got shortchanged because he's around a little bit and he like talks to Mark in the beginning and then he's around for that like the college episode feels almost like it was like like a like an episode out of. I guess it's not really a bot like you can't call it a bottle episode because it doesn't work like that, but it feels like an episode like that they could slot in wherever needed, right? Um, and like it kind of exists out like you could put that episode anywhere in the timeline, right? Like it's not exactly a filler episode, but I think it's got a lot of those kind of like hallmarks to it, right? Like
Sure.
you see this in anime too. Actually, I think this is an interesting way to go with this too, because like you mentioned like animation is the right way to do this stuff, and it's like I think that's the thing that like shonen anime figured out a long time ago, right? Like that you do these superhero stories in anime, and this is like this animation style isn't exactly anime, but it reminded me astoundingly of like Neo Yokio, which is like a Western anime. Um, and I'm interested. Like I just think it's interesting that like things seem to be going that way because something I see like pounded on Twitter is that manga is outselling comic books in the U.S. Right? Like the big thing that
Mhm.
everybody points to is Barnes Noble has increasingly large manga sections and the the graphic novel section keeps shrinking down because no one cares about that stuff anymore. And I wonder if this kind of like if this is like a forebearer of things to come, right? Like
Yeah,
shrink.
like we're gonna get some breakthrough anime movie, and it's gonna be all anime movies all the time.
Yeah, maybe not anime. Like I don't think it has to be a movie, right? Like like something
Sure. Yeah.
like a TV series. I think makes sense, right? Like like an American animated like something that fuses like the popularity of say Batman Beyond, right, and kind of like the popularity of say Boku no Hero Academia, right?
Mm.
Like, um, and like kind of like inhabits that space in kind of the American space, probably with the anime visual, so you get enough callback, right? I guess like Avatar kind of fits that kind of definition in a while, right? Like,
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of describing Avatar a little bit. I also feel like in general superhero shows have been trending in this direction. Like if I think
yeah,
of Young Justice, I think it has more anime-esque quote unquote action, for instance, than Justice League did. Um, which also probably has more anime-esque action than Batman the Animated Series did, for instance. So I think I do kind of agree that there's this confluence towards anime. Well, I actually at the same time I sort of think it goes sort of both ways in a way. Um,
yeah. No, I mean like Boku no Hero Academia is clearly inspired by American
yeah,
superheroes,
exactly,
right?
right? Like I think that the progression from Dragon Ball Z. Oh my God, Orion, please
Yeah,
stop.
fucking
From
All
Dragon
Might
Ball
yelling
Z.
Texas Smash, right? Like you can't make it more obvious than that, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um,
I mean, this is exactly what I find so interesting about Boku no Hero Academia and why I wanted to compare. I mean, Invincible is a pretty good comparison show, I think, because it also lives in this same sort of world of stakes. But that's part of why every when I was watching Boku no Hero Academia, I was just like, oh my God, this reminds me so much of Young Justice. Like
yeah,
they're so similar.
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean I haven't watched Young Justice, but like I can even see it even like in Teen Titans Go, right? Like that format is similar to like there are comedy animes that play in kind of like that hyper short, like hyper, like almost four
Mhm.
coma esque format. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's
Hey, as long as we all agree that Teen Titans Go is good.
I mean I enjoy Teen Titans Go to the movies. I
I
mean
also did, and I cannot wait to watch it again. Because I haven't watched it in a while, and I want to now.
I think I saw somebody on Twitter like making things like in retrospect people are gonna like Teen Titans Go a lot more than they do now. Um,
Oh, that is exactly my
yeah.
take. I think it's the SpongeBob of this generation, right? And that 10 years from now, the Zoomers are going to be memeing about Teen Titans Go jokes the way that we meme about SpongeBob jokes.
You know what was really funny? I saw a different Twitter thread that was like I looked up some forum posts from like the beginning of SpongeBob, and it's like people all shitting on SpongeBob and being like, "Man, are you guys? I'm excited for Chalk Zone, right?" Which is like, uh,
Chalk Zone sucked. Anyway,
oh, oof, hot takes, hot takes,
hot takes. Yeah, hot takes. Chalk Zone was garbage. Danny Phantom though, that was good shit.
oof. Oh man, there's like a whole sub thing there about what's his name? The guy who made Danny Phantom in Fairly Odd Parents.
Yeah, yeah. He Butch
Butch Hartman.
Hartman?
Yeah, Butch Hartman. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. Yeah, he has a YouTube channel and he's extremely religious on
Yeah,
it,
no, I don't know if
which is so weird.
I don't know if you caught it, but like a couple of years ago, he tried to kickstart, like crowdfund a, like not explicitly Christian, but like good, moral, clean streaming service, right? Like where you don't need all the sex and the violence. And it
Wow,
failed.
I did not know that, but fair enough. I
Yeah,
guess
yeah,
it makes sense that he's in children's television.
yeah. No, I mean, it takes all types, right? Like, but yeah, no, I mean that failed miserably. So because people weren't interested in it. Um, but Yeah, I mean, there's. I think. Do we have more to talk about with Invincible? There's.
What else? What else do you want to talk about with Invincible? I think part of something that makes me a little frustrated with Invincible is that it comes out in this kind of ecosystem. Like you haven't watched The Boys, but having watched Watchmen, The Boys, and now this, I sort of feel like the deconstruction stuff. I said the other day on the podcast when I was watching The Boys that The Boys is pretty like head empty. It doesn't really have anything smart to say. It just kind of is like there for shock value, which is sort of valuable in its own right in a way. Um, but I just find myself more and more sort of kind of like frustrated by these like deconstructionist takes because I guess I kind of feel like they're lazy in a way.
have you seen the Netflix one? It's like Mr. Jupiter, or whatever that it got
Oh,
canceled.
Jupiter's Legacy. That I mentioned Mark Millar earlier. That's one of his books. Because Netflix famously bought his whole comic line. He had a whole thing called like the Millarverse or whatever. There were just like a bunch of his own creator-owned stuff, and Netflix bought him out, and that was like the first thing that they did with it. I have not watched Jupiter's Legacy, though. I have heard that it is in this exact same vein and
Yeah.
unfun and uninteresting because of it.
So that's like I was thinking about this too because I hadn't watched any of the like I've watched Watchmen, right? But
Mm.
um like I could see it being tired if it was like the third one that you'd watched. But like I also think it kind of stands on its own in a lot of ways as a coming of age story, right? Like I think there's like a lot of real stuff there, right? Like um uh kind of like the 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 kind of Freudian esque, right? Like fight with your father, right? Like type of stuff.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah, like the Oedipal, or not Oedipal.
yeah.
That's not what I meant. That's not what I meant.
Well, I mean, it is one half of the Oedipal complex, right? It's
Yeah,
not
I
it's
guess
not the
that is it.
mom fucking part,
When
but it's
people
the
say Oedipal, they mean
they
the
mean
other
the
thing
mom
most of the
fucking
time.
part, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Um,
uh, but
but
yeah,
yeah, it definitely has that stuff. And I also think that it will probably expand more. One of the things that I like a lot about Robert Kirkman is that he has very few sort of like un kind of like complicated sort of characters or villains. You even get this with Rex to a certain extent. Like Rex is kind of a dick, and that's like his personality. But he's not just like he's not just like an unending asshole for no reason, if that makes sense. Um, and I feel like that's something to Invincible's credit, right? Which is that, given enough time, it will kind of humanize all of its characters, uh, and and make them more dynamic and more complex and less kind of archetypal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. Yeah,
I
no,
don't even know if I really think that Rex sells it in the TV show. He does in the comics, but
not yet.
he does in the TV show.
Not, I don't think he does yet, and he's like building
Okay.
towards it, right? Like, like
I don't know that I could even really I don't know that I could really tell because the comics are so in my head when it comes to
yeah,
that stuff.
yeah. So like he gets like he's just kind of like an asshole, but he seems genuinely repentant. A couple like like for cheating on Adam Eve, um, and like the other part of this too, like you get like a moment of it when like when Rex shows up as like the young version of him, and he's like, what the fuck, right? And
Yeah.
the line is like, my childhood was not great, right? Like which kind of starts to seed it, and then like he gets like the moment where he's like scrubbing down the wall, right? Like, and I don't think it's there yet, but I think you'll get there in the future.
Yeah, I like that moment a lot. I do also like a lot of those characters, like Black Samson, for instance. He's done a little dirty, I think, in the
Yeah,
show.
what are his
But
powers? Because like I got my powers back, and they don't say what they are, right? Like this kind
yeah,
of
his powers, I don't actually remember offhand. I think it's like electric shit, or maybe it's like strength or something like that. But his thing is that he's a member of the Global Guardians who, before Nolan kills them all, loses his powers and is like really depressed about that, right? So he puts together a suit of like power armor, sort of like Iron Man armor to like mimic
to get it back,
his old
right? Like
abilities.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but the role that he plays in the show is the exact same role as he plays in the comics, which I like a lot. As the kind of like, you got to be grown-ups now. You know, the the teen team. It's okay for you guys to be kind of goofing around when that's the world you're living in, but you're the global guardians now, and you need to take this shit really seriously. And I like that a lot. I think that that's like a cool piece of like of his character or whatever.
yeah. I mean, I think it is a little bit undercut when it's like, and you're a robot, so fuck you, right? Like, because I should be the leader because I'm the oldest, and the robot does not understand people. Um,
Yeah, it's a little bit better in the comics because Robot really sucks as the leader of the Global
hmm,
Guardians at first. Uh,
yeah,
you don't really get that in this. You get a little bit of it, I guess, because they kind of fuck up this whole. But like even then, like it's not quite as clear how bad a job he's doing, compared to compared to what you get in the other version of the story. Like I think it's played the stuff with Battle Beast and Machine Head is sort of played as Robot making an error and it narratively serves the purpose of taking the Global Guardians sort of out of the fight for when Nolan is, uh, you know, he's about to fight Mark.
yeah,
Um, but I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it felt like there was a lot squeezed into this season, right? Like that probably could have been dealt with that over a longer. It felt like they wanted to get like all the major players in, right? Like the
Hmm.
whole Battle Beast and I forget the character's name. The dude you were talking about. The dude that
Machine Head Titan. Titan is
Titan
the
Titan
rock guy.
Titan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. Like that whole like it felt like they wanted to get those characters into the first season to tease them for the second season. Um. Where they probably could have developed it. Like I'm sure part of it was like, oh, we're gonna have Bashar Ali, or I'm probably mispronouncing that, be Titan, so we need to get him into the first season, and we need to do enough with him to justify him being there, even though like that probably should like like it happened in the comic, probably should have been a thing in the second season or something like.
Yeah, I also think that the show, like something, and you could call this a criticism, right? Something that like HBO shows have, like Game of Thrones or something, right? Is there kind of a bunch of mini episodes inside of every individual episode, if that makes sense? Like you kind of go from, because it's an ensemble, you go from King's Landing and you're watching these things and kind of like jumping around. Whereas this show was more truly episodic, where it sets up some drama inside of the episode that then terminates by the end of the episode, sort of thing.
Yeah,
And uh, and I think that leaves you less room to do sort of like the overarching,
yeah,
stuff.
I wonder how much of this is like, the showrunners being afraid they're going to get canceled before they get to do all the stuff they want to do, right? Like, um, because there's no need for necessarily all this to be in like a long running thing, but like nothing lasts that long anymore. Um, yeah. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I am excited for a second season. Part of me wants to not read the comics just so like I'm not spoiled on it. Um, Maybe I will after it all comes out. Um, but
Part of me wants to go back to the comics. I'm probably remembering them better than they were.
yeah,
I think is one thing because obviously, I these came out 5, 10, 15 years ago, right? So that's just like a lot of time for me to be forgetting some of the minor stuff that probably doesn't work as well.
that makes sense. Yeah. Uh, all right. Do we have anything else we want to talk about with regards to this?
Nope, I think that's it. That's our comprehensive Invincible take, I guess.
All right. What else? Or rather, how's your week been? That's the thing we do after we do Invincible, or if we do the main section.
How has my week been? I have been, I don't know, I've been playing some WoW, but obviously pretty off WoW until tomorrow when 9.1 hits, which is exciting. Um, because, the grind. Let me think. I don't know. I've been playing. Oh, have I talked about No Man's Sky actually?
I don't think much. You mentioned you got it.
I have been playing No Man's Sky. That's like been my big game recently, which I think is not interesting or compelling. I don't have a lot to say about it, but it is just finally that I got. I just we're doing it when playing. We're playing No Man's Sky, I guess, and zipping through the universe and like farming, like materials and stuff like that. I think the thing about No Man's Sky that I quite enjoy is the raw scale of everything. I really have no idea how to do it, but it really sells even though it's all procedurally generated, and you can kind of tell that it's all procedurally generated, and I probably prefer that less to a sort of cultivated space, right? Like Mass Effect or something like that, right? Where everything is kind of handcrafted. There is something really cool to the just I warp to a new galaxy and there I this is what's there. And I don't have any other options. It's just the world that I live in. I think that's just like insanely cool and a lot of fun. And so yeah, I guess that's my big No Man's Sky take. You said you refunded No Man's Sky, right?
I did. I bought it. I bought it on release. And I refunded it within like the refund window. But I've considered going back to it ever since it got good, right? Like I mentioned last time, last time you brought it up, the goodening of No Man's Sky, which is like
Yep.
they went silent and made it good. Um, so yeah, no, I haven't, but I haven't played it since.
Yeah, I mean, good on them for making it good. It is just it has become like the easy game for me to do, because you're just like mindlessly lasering rocks or whatever to get cares. So I'll be watching something on my other screen. Do you know the YouTuber Quentin Reviews?
I'm vaguely familiar.
He's just like another of these, like kind of media criticism YouTubers. The thing that I find interesting about Quentin is that he's kind of young and also pretty stupid, which is worse than it sounds. But he, for a long time, his 400,000 subscriber like thing was he'll make a video on iCarly if uh, if he gets to 400,000 subscribers. And he did make the iCarly video, the first half actually of the first 3 seasons of iCarly, which is not a show that I even know. Like that was by the time iCarly was coming out, I was past it, right? But he made, a 4.5 hour YouTube video just about binging iCarly, and it was great. I had a great time watching. It reminded me of the Tokimeki Memorial video,
Ah, yes.
of just like really sinking. It was like a Saturday, just farming ferrite dust in No Man's Sky, and listening to somebody describe like the basic plot of these weird iCarly episodes where she builds a nuclear reactor in her, apartment or whatever.
Now, speaking of which, I'm like Tim Rogers has been sick for a while, which is part of why the Cyberpunk 2077 video is taking so long. Um,
Damn.
Yeah, no, it's sad. It's sad. I'm hoping he'll be able to put it out soon. We'll see.
Me too.
Because I need, like, I actually went and watched the Final Fantasy VII video because I hadn't watched it. I was like, I should watch this because, any day now, Cyberpunk 2077, right? Right, right, Tim, right? Please don't die, Tim. Um, but yeah. Yeah, so
Yeah.
go on.
Yeah, I went hard for when I watched the Tokimeki Memorial. I then went back in time and watched all of them.
Yeah, good stuff. So I got two big things that I've been doing over the past couple of weeks. The first one is you've probably already heard this because I've been spreading this everywhere. But I've got starting a conspiracy. I've got at least one person that agrees with me that this conspiracy I guess is that Ed Sheeran's a giant nerd. This his newest music video, Bad Habits. He's like he's definitely cosplaying a Malkavian. This is definitely a Vampire the Masquerade inspired thing. You can't convince me otherwise. I'm gonna put a picture from it on screen real quick. It is just like, so I saw a bunch of people making takes about oh, he's doing a Joker thing. I'm like, oh, this will be funny. I'll look at it, and it's like he's got the vampire. He's like, no, this is definitely a Malkavian. This is definitely a Vampire the Masquerade thing. And I don't watch, or I don't really listen to Ed Sheeran, but he's been in Game of Thrones. This is like, he's got this. My take is that he's definitely a big nerd. Do you have any thoughts on this, or?
I think I would not be surprised. He reads exactly like Joe Manganiello and Vin Diesel, who are also famously gigantic nerd celebrities. Um, I would not be surprised at all if Ed Sheeran was like closetly like a, like
Huge
Henry
nerd.
Cavill, like a World of Warcraft player or
Yeah.
something.
Oh man, that would be a great D&D cast, right? Like Vin Diesel and Henry Cavill and Ed Sheeran, and just like try to make that work. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, the other big thing, is Buddy. Are you aware that Discord presides in our society? Which is this is like a thing you don't get because this is Potemkin's theme song, Armorclad Faith. You should.
I have actually watched quite a lot of Guilty Gear Strive over the last couple of days, just because I joined a Discord, like just a streamer that I followed. I finally joined a Discord, and they've all been playing Guilty Gear while they're waiting on 9.1 to come out, and so I've actually been watching just a lot of Potemkin, because the guy plays a lot of Potemkin. That's his like favorite. Apparently, Potemkin is very good. He
He is
says.
he was very very good in the beta one, but he is still a strong character. Grapplers are usually not super good because like they just the way that they kind of like work outside the typical dynamics, and so like it's hard to make them good and not make them overpowered. They're also like they tend to like occupy sometimes that like Yi Master Yi kind of like where it's like we can't make them very good because then they're just like they are unbeatable by noobs, right? Because like they kind of like the part of kind of like the core fighting games triangle, right, is attack, defense, and throw, right? Like you can throw people out, like blocks can override throws, and and blocks basically beat attacks, right? Because then it gives you opportunity to counter attack, right? Um, and grapplers push very hard on the throw part of that triangle, and that's usually like gets under noob skin, right? This is like the original scrub quote is probably like somebody complaining about throws being cheap, right? Like,
Yeah.
So that it's kind of hard sometimes to deal with grapplers as a new player.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I definitely get that.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I've been enjoying a lot. I think if besides watching streams, you should listen to the soundtrack, right? Like Guilty Gear Strive is also probably the most metal video game that isn't directly about metal, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, the soundtrack for fighting games that I have in my head is Soul Calibur 2. Like this will sometimes be a Twitter meme where people will put Soul Calibur 2 themes underneath stuff. Like Donkey does this, for instance, in a couple of his videos and stuff. Those songs are burned into my brain. So I've always really liked. There's just something about doing a match, and it's like 3 minutes, and you have this fight song going along with it.
yeah, no, I mean, that's why I opened the way I did. Like, I just like because it's Potemkin theme, I just have society. It's society just burned into my head because it's like the most legible part of the song while you're trying to play. Um, but yeah, no, it's a beautiful game. They really nailed the netcode. The lobbies have some problems, but like the actual playing of the game is like like 9 times out of 10 butter smooth. I've had some bad matches, but nothing terrible. Like Smash is pretty kind of like the problem with this is like a basically East versus West thing, right? The Japanese devs are kind of like infamously like insular and don't like kind of like taking things like so. Back up one more step. The um like some guys in America made rollback netcode and basically licensed it out for free to everybody. Like, just take this, make fighting games good. Just don't have us live in this delay based thing. And the Japanese have always been very hesitant to adopt it for whatever reason. Part of it,
Sure.
a big part of it, is that if you're a Japanese dev making a game for a Japanese audience, one, Japanese internet is very good, and two, the country's not super big, right? Like you don't have the delay problems because going from like Tokyo to, I'm not great with Japanese geography, but like going from the top of the island to the bottom of the island isn't going to be that far, and so even if you have delay-based netcode, which is the alternative, it's not usually a problem because you have decent latency.
Yeah.
But Street Fighter tried to do rollback and didn't do it particularly well. There's some bugs that like there's a whole thing there that I don't have all the details on, but Guilty Gear Strive is the first big name title to really nail it, and it's doing super well, and or it works super well, and the game's doing super well, right? Like Samurai Showdown was a game that I really loved, but like netcode was so bad that is unsustainable long term.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully this will influence people to like make good netcode, and whatever.
That's important, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah.
Um, that's funny, the thing about the devs or whatever. Like, I've been thinking a lot about this recently because, you know, uh, the for a while I was like really getting into WoW Twitter drama where people just like hate the devs constantly and are like shitting on the devs. And I thought for a minute, I was like, whoa, this is like crazy. But then I sort of had this like weird out of body moment when I was reading the EDH, the commander for Magic the Gathering subreddit, about how Mark Rosewater said that if your goal is to have fun playing Magic, that maybe you shouldn't optimize your decks and instead include fun cards instead of obvious staples for the format. And everyone in the comments was shitting all over him. Like, they were just like, oh, like Wizards doesn't know. Wizards needs to print, whatever, right? Like, Mark Rosewater said he fucking hates EDH. I'm not taking his advice about anything. And I was just like, wow, this is the same thing. This is just like the WoW devs. Holy shit. Like,
Yeah, part of this is like the complaining aspect, right? Like
yeah.
you don't comment generally if you're like if you're happy, right? Like, yeah. Kind of speaking of which, I haven't gotten it yet, but I ordered an EDH deck off of Amazon.
Oh, are we gonna play? We're gonna play in Jacksonville.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean,
Yes.
I want
Well,
this.
what deck did you get? Like a precon or?
So I got a um so this is the story, right? I don't know if I've shouted
Okay.
him out on the channel before or on the podcast before, but this guy Remy, he does these Magic the Gathering parody music videos. Um, and he's got one about Ramp called like 10,000 Mana, which is a parody of some like 10,000 miles or something like that. It's like,
Okay.
you know, I'd spend 10,000 mana, right? So it's about Ramp, right? So I
Hmm.
was like, I would like to make an EDH deck based around this. So I went to search um for like blue green legends, right? Because like that's where you go if you're gonna do Ramp, right? Like, and you don't want to be just mono green. And so the top result was like oh, I should look this up, but it's a card, it's commander, or it's a card that lets you play a second land, and when you drop the land, it it draws a card for you. Like you play a land and you draw a card. It's like a 4/4 blue green thing. And I looked at it. It's like, oh, this is. Like, I looked it up. It's like, oh, it's like $10 a card. I could do that, right, if I wanted to. And I'm like, wait, he's from a commander set. Can I just buy his deck and like sub things in? So yeah. I can tell you if you do.
Now I'm really interested. Oh, I know this. So AC Tyrant of the Gyre or whatever.
I think so. Yeah, yeah. That
Yeah,
sounds right.
he is a very not common, but he is a very popular commander. So in the commander universe, green blue is the most popular color combo of, because like it is commonly believed that blue is the most powerful like the most powerful color, and green is probably the second most powerful color. So green blue decks are like super powerful, basically.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't
Um,
mean to, pick the ringer set, but
I don't think that his precon is a ringer. And it definitely wouldn't be a bringer against some of our decks. Like my deck is obviously like upgraded a whole bunch, so
right.
it's
No.
naturally kind of like more powerful.
Y-
But
Yeah.
so yeah, so there's just like I don't know. There's like a lot of good stuff to be had when it comes to commander stuff. I recently just bought a new commander uh deck myself for Feather the Redeemed. The two worst colors in commander are typically
Is that
red and
red
white.
white? Yeah, yeah. I used to
Mhm.
run a Feather the Redeemed deck, I think I was playing MTG Arena.
Yeah,
Uh,
so Feather has a really interesting, so Feather's mechanic, just for everybody at home, is when you target a creature you control with an instant or sorcery, that instant then gets exiled and pops back into your hand at the end of the turn if Feather's out, right? So what you do with Feather in Commander is use that as a card advantage engine, and you have a bunch of cantrips, like cheap, 1 or 2 cost instants and sorceries that do stuff like gets +2/+0, draw a card. Gets +1/+0, draw a card or whatever. So you cast all these spells, you draw a bunch of cards, then those cards go back into your hand, and you can like redo this over and over again. Which I just always thought is neat. I think that that's like a cool way to build, a cool way to build the commander. It's very combat focused. A lot of good commander decks are not very combat focused. They're like, you create a value engine recursive loop of something, right? Like I'm gonna create a million creature tokens, and I'm gonna put a creature in play that says when a creature token die or when a creature dies, deal 1 damage to all your enemies. Then I sack all of my creatures instantly and deal 25 damage to everybody. Like that kind of stuff is typically what like wins commander games. Um, and so I just like the idea of like getting a commander who's just about doing combat tricks and uh and finding a kind of backwards value engine in colors that are like very uncommon. So yeah, so I picked up a Feather the Redeem deck, and I also picked up a couple of upgrades for some of the other decks. I think my favorite way to do commander is to buy a precon and then upgrade it. Like look at the precon, what are the themes in that precon, and then go, oh, I know what to do with this, and then shuffle in out a bunch of cards to make it better.
yeah, no, I'm looking at the deck because I bought it just because it make more sense to me just buy the deck than try and buy an individual card.
Yep.
And now I'm looking at it, it's like, so one of the lines from the song that inspired this is, I would cast Hydroid Crassus for 10,004. And Hydroid Crassus is apparently a $15 card, which I have a bunch of copies of on MTG Arena, but I'm probably gonna
Wow.
have to eat that if I want to put it in the deck. But I do, right? Like it's like the obvious card. Are you familiar with Hydroid Crassus?
Yeah, it's the well, I'm actually not familiar offhand. It's the X Hydra, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Or am I thinking of the wrong
Well, I
one?
think all Hydras are X, right? Like that's like, isn't that like a Hydra feature? Is they have
Oh,
like,
maybe it is just a Hydra
yeah.
feature.
So Hydroid Crassus is um X green blue. When you cast a spell, gain half X life and draw half X cards. Round down each time. Flying Trample. Hydroid Crassus enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. That's like the rampy creature, right? Like, um, yeah. So, you know,
That's very cool.
I ran. Oh, so that's why I ran this. There was like, maybe I shouldn't tell you so I can surprise you. But there's like, I ran an alt WinCon deck where like there was this card in, I guess it was one of these like Ravinica Legion, like whatever this block was, which is like if you place enough, it would have been a Ravinica deck. It's like a Simic build card. It's like if you place enough +1/+1 counters, you place counters then also on this card, this enchantment, and if it gets enough tokens on it, then you win. Um, so that
Interesting. Yeah, one of my dream commander decks has always been Erixmathes, the Slumbering Isle, which is a very dumb commander. He like casts four. He it's 4 to cast him, and he's a 12/12, and he enters with a bunch of slumber counters. But every time you cast a spell, you pull a slumber counter off. But as long as he has a slumber counter, he's a land. He's not a creature, and he like taps for green blue. But what people do with Erixmathes is use him as ramp, basically as a 4 mana two ramp land to then um do essentially like Sea Serpent Leviathan Tribal, where you just do like all of the really gigantic, like, 8-9 mana Sea Serpents that do crazy shit because nobody ever has the mana to play them. I have long thought about finally running the Arixmethes Sea Serpent Tribal commander deck.
No, I had a back when I back in college, I had a when Zendikar dropped, I had a fucking Valakut deck before that was like really like it was like when Zendikar dropped. I
Oh yeah,
think
that became so meta. I remember the Valakut deck becoming really meta.
it became meta after I stopped playing. But I have a bunch of cards from that I think I'm gonna try and pull out, right? Like Landfall Expedition and like Oracle of Moldiah, which is like a card that no one plays.
Oracle of Moldiah might actually be banned in Commander, but it's
Oh,
super good.
oh, is it really?
Oracle of Moldiah is like a $50 card.
Really? I remember it being like not super expensive.
Hold on, I'm gonna quickly look it up, see if I can find a quick price. Because I remember it being a very expensive card when I was getting back
Well,
into
I
Commander.
should
Yeah, it's a $30 card right now.
I
Oracle
should
of Moldiah.
I should pull them out because like I think when they first came out they were like $1. Because
Yeah,
like
and it is not banned in Commander. I'm actually thinking of something else.
okay. But yeah, no, I hope I can find my cards then and pull it out because
Yeah, I would love to have a Commander cast. We need to play a bunch of Commander in Jacksonville, and maybe at Syrian's wedding too.
yeah. Um, but yeah. So what else can we talk about? Oh, 9.1. Anything you're particularly looking forward to?
I was looking forward to the grind, to be honest. I don't even want to call it the grind. I just want to call it, getting gear. I don't know. Um, the big thing I feel like is that I've sort of like exhausted the content in 9.0. And so even though like I still love mythics, and I always am happy to like log on and do a bunch of mythics and like pushing mythics kind of ever higher is sort of, I think, the thing that is going to keep me until this system changes dramatically, or like I lose my mythics team or something like that, right? Like, man, mythics are just so fucking fun. Um, but the but just all like the new content, I feel like is gonna be sweet. Like there's gonna be new dailies or whatever in Korthia. Like people really hated the Maw and like doing Stygia, but I always had a good time doing it just as like a I don't know. I want to say it like as a way to keep my fingers busy, but the truth is that I think there's a little magic to the Maw where it was truly dangerous, especially if you were trying to do stuff like the group quests solo, which I just found incredibly fun. Like going into Perdition Hold and having to do like the Perdition Hold weekly, but you don't have anybody else on, and so it's like you are alone against those elites, and you really kind of have to pump, or else they could kill you. Like, there's just something about that I really kind of connected with, and I ended up farming the boss. So I'm hoping that Korthia will be pretty similar. The new area in the game. Obviously, there's going to be a new Mythic Plus season, which I'm going to go hard for, as expected, with a ton of changes. Some of which I think are very good, but I do worry that it is being over nerfed. A lot of changes have hit the PTR recently that I'm just a little like, whoa. It's going to be like way easier to do a lot of these dungeons because of these changes. And then I guess Torghast stuff is changing, to be more like Horrific Visions were in BFA, which I famously also really loved. So that's good. I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm probably not going to touch my the Burning Crusade classic character for a long time.
yeah.
It's funny, like the thing about the Burning Crusade and like classic in general is it reminds me of like the Mr. Burns meme, where like, it's like all of the diseases trying to kill him, but they're all getting stuck in the door. That's kind of how I feel about classic with design decisions. All of the design decisions are like individually bad, but they kind of collectively make a really compelling experience. And I don't quite know how to quantify that. And I wonder how long it will last. Like, will this last into Cataclysm, Mists, right? Like, I have a feel the shine has to come off the apple at some point, right? Um, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I don't know. For number one myself, I'm just kind of like it'll be nice to have like something new to do, I guess, in the game. Reason to come
Yeah,
back.
I mean, I'm very ready to get out of Castle Nathria. I mean, we did our Castle Nathria cast, but like, man, spending 7 months in that place is tough. Which
Uh,
is which is a little rough because like I feel bad in a way. Um,
yeah. So
but I like
kind of in
I
this
don't know.
vein, how do you feel about us not being able to down Sardonathrius a second time?
Yikes. I have very complex thoughts about that. Which is kind of I don't know. It is that is a complicated it's a complicated thing. I wonder what we've talked a little bit about what it might look like. Like the thought right now is that for um the duration of normal we'll do one night a week, but then when we start pushing into heroic again, we might pick up the second raid night if people want to do the second raid night again. Um, because I think that was when I was having the most fun in Castle Nathria, was when we were really progressing through absolutely everything, and we had like the double raid nights a week.
Yeah, no, I
Um,
think we'd be able to get Denathrius down if we were doing Tuesday again. If we were doing Tuesday, Thursday, right? Like we so very clearly lost progress that we had to remake whenever we swapped weeks, which just
yeah, that
unfortunate.
is 100% true. Absolutely true, I think. Just as like a muscle memory thing. I also think that this version of the game is a lot less forgiving than other versions of the game when it has come to this stuff. So, for instance, if we were in Legion or BFA, we would be constantly gaining artifact power during this time, right? So we would be continuing to increase the level of our artifact, make stuff better, make stuff more, more powerful or whatever. Whereas in Shadowlands, you max out your renown tree. Sorry, bud, that's it. You want more DPS, get better gear. That's it. Which I think is compelling in a certain sense, right? Um, as a challenge. But there's less of sort of like a handicap in a way that like as you progress through the season, you get more and more powerful, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, at some level I think that's probably a good thing too, right? Like if I had thought that in order to be competitive, I needed to grind out like 13,000 artifact power or whatever every week, I probably would have been out of the game already, right? Like the fact that I
Yeah.
can just like cruise for a while has been good for me personally, right? Like
Yeah, people complain about the time gating in WoW, but I think that they don't quite realize that that's the purpose of the time gating, right? You time gate whatever it is, Digia, Torghast, all these different things to prevent people from just like no lifing this stuff because they feel like they have to and just like burning themselves out insanely hard. Um, I don't know if there's going to be new anima rewards, but I really hope there are because I bought my renown anima, gear, like um the armor set that you get that's cosmetic, and I've just sort of been sitting on like 30,000 anima, and I'm just like, what do I do with all this?
have you gotten all like the alt colors?
Not of like weapons, only of
Yeah, no.
the armor set, but yeah.
I would say that's the bit like the weapons are like 35K a piece, and I still haven't gotten those. Or
Yeah, the nice thing about being a warrior is that I can pick up any weapon except for a wand. So I can get all of those appearances for the Necrolords on Bairn, and I probably will end up doing that stuff. But for right now, it's just like I don't. I'm just sitting on it because maybe there is stuff to buy with Anima in 9.1.
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
no, I know
know.
what you mean. Yeah.
Who's to say, right? So
Yeah, that
yeah.
also feels like the type of thing where, like, come the end of the expansion, you'll be able to get it all within like 3 weeks, right? Like, you'll be like,
Mhm.
ah, so you get like 30,000 anima per daily quest, right? So, like, which
Yeah, I think that's the reason that underwrites a lot of why these grinds exist the way that they do, is because they need to stretch it over the course of 2 years. Like, so for instance, famously in Battle for Azeroth, there were mounts that you could get out of the island expeditions, right? They're like mounts and toys and items and stuff like that that you would get. You would do your island expedition, you'd kill a bunch of guys, you would at the end of it maybe get a piece of like these pieces of transmog gear or whatever else. At the end of the expansion, they added a grindable resource, like these doubloons that you could spend on chests that included like those mounts and stuff like that, right? So if you wanted to get the mounts, you could just spend doubloons on them or whatever. And people were like, "Oh my god, I can't believe this wasn't in here from the beginning." But I'm just like, dude, if this was in here from the beginning, everybody would have been done with islands in like 6 weeks. Like, like that's the reason that I feel like they always start low and then increase, kind of like the anime world quests are kind of like this. I kind of wouldn't be surprised if there was somebody at Blizzard who was like, all right, we're gonna start the animal rewards like really slowly, and then we're gonna add a little bit more, then we're gonna add a little bit more, and then we're gonna add a little bit more, because like if you're giving everybody the anima that we earn now out of, from day one, everyone would be completely done,
Yeah.
like with their stuff.
Yeah, I think everything was like a touch too restrictive at the beginning, but yeah, I generally
I
agree.
actually do think I agree with you. I
Yeah,
think that, like, I think this feels good now, where we're at now, and mostly I just want more stuff to buy. Like I think anima is probably the best, like a max level grindable resource whose only use is like cosmetics and shit. That sounds pretty sweet to me, to be honest.
well, I
Um,
mean, that's the other thing too is it's not like for a while it's also like your improvements, right? Like you have to invest. So I think that's kind of like a good thing. It's like you know you have to eat your vegetables for a certain period of time, and maybe you could cheat that a little bit, but you're just like making your bigger upgrades like less good. So um,
yeah, and I also think that it like encourages people to sort of set these sort of like milestones for themselves in a way. Like I don't know, I didn't really hit this because by the time that came out, I already had level 3 and everything. But I like the idea that, like, let's say I'm a fresh player coming in 9.1. I I start doing whatever, I'm earning anima, my bags are filling up with all this stuff or whatever, and I now get to go like, oh well, if I put 1,000 in each, 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, I'm earning more anima. Like that, I feel like that progression feels good.
yeah, no, I think I agree with you. I definitely.
But
Well,
yeah, I guess that's about it.
yeah. Do you have anything else you want to talk about before we jet out of here?
Not really.
Okay. Yeah, well, if you'd like to tell us what you thought about Invincible or 9.1 or Guilty Gear Strive, I guess you can email us at subdersplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@subdersplaygames.com. You follow us at twitch.tv/subdersplaygames where these go live. We also have everything else that you'd expect: YouTube, rate review us on the podcast services. I think, oh, and we've got a Patreon too if you feel so inclined. That's everything I have. Buddy, you have anything you're looking to promote?
One thing I just do want to announce for people who maybe have heard me talk about this, our Metroidvania Souls-like game Grime. We just announced the release date today. It's coming out in 5 weeks, August 2nd. Woo!
Yay!
Yeah, there was a demo
Yay!
last week. I don't think that the demo is going live again, but I don't know the details on this. But I man, I love Grime. Grime is a fun time, and if you're not paying attention to it, then highly recommended. Take a look at the Grime, all the cool Grime stuff that's coming.
As Nina Struthers says, check a look. Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.